Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where it's another kind of chilly December day here at the park. The subject of today's video is going to be another medium format camera. In this case it's going to be kind of like the little brother to the Pentax 67. This camera is the Pentax 645N. The Pentax 645 was produced in a few different variations. The first was the Pentax 645, which had a similar layout to this camera, but with a manual focus system. The 645 added autofocus and a more sophisticated auto exposure system, and then this was improved in the later version, the 645 too. This camera was produced not so long ago. I don't know the specific year, but when I first came here to Japan a dozen years ago, you could still buy a 645 in some of the larger camera shops here in Tokyo. You could still find them brand new. This isn't necessarily saying much, because when I was hunting around some of these camera shops in the city, I actually came across cameras like the, say, Canon QL17 or Yashica GX in some camera shops, which were still new in the box, and they'd had these things sitting in their stores, I guess, since the 1960s or 70s. But this is of course a much later model camera with a lot of the I guess later technology and functions that I guess rival even the ones which you find in the latest DSLR cameras which you find today. So the Pentax 645 is a medium format camera which shoots 120 roll film and shoots in the 6x45 centimeter format. Of course, medium format film, 120 roll film, can be used in a variety of formats, and 6x45 is the smallest format. The popular format is 6x6, which you find in the TLR cameras and Hasselblad cameras. And then in the bigger ones, you can get 6x7, 6x8, or 6x9 formats. And some of the really old German cameras, I've even seen 6x12s. You might say, well, you know, if I have these different options available in 120 roll film, these different format options, why would I choose, 645 when I can get 6x7 or 6x9? And there are a couple of good answers for this. The first answer is that you get more exposures at the 6x45 format than you would get at 6x6 or 6x9. Compared to 6x6, you'll get a few more, four more photographs out of a roll of 120 film. So it's more economical in that way. And second, in the 6x45 format, you can have a somewhat smaller camera body. If this were a 6x7 camera, of course the body would end up being about twice as big, and 6x9 or whatever, they're going to be even larger. So you have, the 6x45 gives you medium format capability, more exposures per roll, and a somewhat compact camera. Now this particular camera is not really compact, mainly because it's equipped with a zoom lens, which is about twice the size of the prime lenses which usually come on these cameras. In medium format photography, zoom lenses are actually kind of unusual. There aren't many medium format systems which use a zoom lens, but the 645 is one of them. And a wonderful thing about having a lens like this particular lens, a zoom lens, is that medium format lenses can be somewhat expensive. And if you say you want a 45mm wide angle lens and say a 75 or 85mm standard lens, you would have to buy these two lenses, and they can be quite expensive. A lens like this, you get both focal lengths and everything in between, and on top of having the options, you don't have to change the lenses between one and the other when you want to change, I guess, the perspective when you're out shooting. Let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Pentax 645N. And what I really love about this camera is the layout of the control. So when I'm sitting back here looking at it from behind, everything that I need to see and everything which I need to be able to control is right here. Everything I can touch with my fingers. There is nothing hidden or out of sight. For example, if I'm shooting with a digital camera and I want to change, say, my ISO setting, I would have to click the menu button, and then I would have to choose which of the chapters in the menu that the film speed settings are in. I have to scroll to that, click on it, and I have to go up or down to change the ISO to what I like, or exposure compensation, or color saturation, or stuff like that. It's quite an ordeal. And for example, the the G7X Mark III, which I'm using to take this video with, that's kind of the same thing. I have to kind of hunt through quite a few different menus to make basic settings to the camera, whereas with the Pentax 645N, everything is right here. Why is this important? Well, my first really good digital camera was a Nikon D700, and I got it and I thought, wow, this is going to be a really cool camera to go out and shoot with. And so I went out to the countryside, and I was kind of like in this ravine which had been washed out by the river. It had this beautiful moss and plants and stuff hanging down the sides, and I was taking pictures of these, and I couldn't get the color to come out right. And then I figured out that the white balance wasn't set right in the camera. By using the auto white balance, everything that was green around me was not coming out green in the image. The color was completely wrong. So I had to get out of the auto white balance and then set the color temperature to where green actually showed as green on the image. When you're using a film camera, using color film, that isn't really a problem, because what your eye sees in regards to color is what film sees. It's a very organic and natural thing. You don't have to play with it or tinker with it. And you don't have to hunt through the menus to try to get green to come out as green on your camera, where a camera like this, green is already green. So, getting back to the controls here, you don't have to go and hunt through any menus because everything is right here. You have shutter speed dial, exposure compensation, you have adjustments for the autofocus and light meter. The only readout we have or anything resembling digital is this LCD screen here, which simply shows you the film speed setting, the frame counter, and also if you are using the digital, I guess not really digital, but data information imprint on the film. And one thing about this camera which is really cool is that when you take a photograph, it imprints the shutter speed and aperture between the frames on the film, so you know what the settings are. Often when I've been taking photographs on film, unless I have a notebook to write these things down and say I want to share the information about what the camera settings were, sometimes I just can't do that. Whereas this camera, it's printed between the frames, so the information is always there. So let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Pentax 645N, and there are quite a few of them here. I'm going to start with the most important one on the top, and that is the shutter speed dial. Shutter speed dial here, we have a full range of speeds from automatic all the way down to 4 seconds. We have B or bulb setting, and we have this safety orange X, which is the flash sync speed. And on this camera, it's a kind of a respectable 1/60th of a second, which isn't bad at all for a medium format camera. The dial on the opposite side is the exposure compensation dial, which is similar to what you find on, let's say, pro-level DSLR cameras and really high-quality film cameras. But this one is a little bit better than those because this one has a full 6-stop range rather than the 4-stop range, which you usually find on 35mm or full-frame sensor digital cameras. And also this one is adjustable in 1/3 stop increments instead of 1/2 a stop, which is usually what you're stuck with other cameras. So this allows you for a much more precise exposure compensation than most other things. On the bottom here we have these pointers on either side, and here we have a kind of an indicator here for the exposure compensation from 1/3, 2/3, and 1. Over here we have this indicator which says ISO, and this is for setting the film speed. So though we have these two pointers here, above the pointers we have a kind of dial or lever which we can push. And if I push this lever toward the prism of the camera, it turns the pointer over to ISO, and this allows me to set the film speed of the camera. So I push this over, and if I push the up or down arrows here next to the LCD, it changes the film speed. Now with the 120 roll film, there is no DX coding or anything like that, which automatically sets the speed. Whenever you put film in the camera, you're going to have to manually set what speed the film is using this dial and these pointers. It's not a complicated or difficult thing to do, and is kind of the standard thing for most of the history of film photography. Moving over on this side, we have an indicator here, a 3-way indicator, and this is for the light meter settings. So we have 3 different settings here. We have the full frame meter, we have center weighted, and spot. This is a wonderful feature on these cameras, which is really hard to find in other medium format cameras, and even hard to find in many digital cameras, DSLR cameras, and something which I would really love to have as a feature on more modern digital cameras. To make these settings, there's a dial here with teeth on it, and you just turn it one way or the other to select the kind of metering mode which you prefer. I really love the spot metering mode in this camera, because like on cameras like the, say, Olympus OM4 or the Canon T90, this allows you to take accurate exposures of subjects which are in difficult light. For example, you're shooting a group of people or a couple of people standing under a tree, and the tree is in a sunny day, and so you have the sunny part of the tree and, say, sunny grass in the front, but the people are standing in the shade in the tree. And if you use something like the full frame light metering, it's going to try and balance everything out to where the dark stuff isn't too dark and the bright stuff isn't too bright, but your people under the tree are going to be really hard to see. If you go ahead and set this to the spot meter function, you can take a meter reading off of, say, a person's body or face under the tree, and the camera will set the exposure so that is what comes out properly exposed in the photo. So it's a really wonderful feature, and it allows you to get really accurate photographs in situations where, you know, it would be really hard to do so otherwise. And it's quite simple in this, kind of like other cameras. You would take the meter reading, and we have this little ML here button where my thumb is. Maybe you can see it. And that just stands for memory lock. And so I can just take the reading, lock the setting, and I can move the camera any way I like, but the camera will remain adjusted to the exposure setting for what you took the meter reading off of. I hope that doesn't sound too complicated. Take the lens cap off here. All right. So on top of the different readings we have, or different settings for the light meter, we also have different autofocus settings. So we have 3 different ones back here, well, actually a couple of them, and we have, say, the full frame autofocus, where it takes kind of a general focus of everything which is in the full frame, and then more of a center-weighted autofocus, which allows you to focus precisely on a small part of you know, what is in your, I guess, a field of view, like a person standing in the middle of the field, or a portrait, and you want their face to be in focus, but you don't care about the rest of the stuff being in focus. When you're using this setting, you have to be kind of careful which of the settings you have over here. We have these settings here which say servo or single, and servo, like on a more modern camera, would be like continuous. So if you want to do this kind of focus on someone who is up close, I would set it to single, not servo. Move this over to the spot setting and say the duck there. I want to take a focus on the duck. I'll go ahead and focus on the duck, and I want to, I want that in focus, but I don't want the duck to be in the center of the photograph. I can just turn this a little bit, and the focus doesn't move. The duck will remain in focus, but I can get the entire, I guess, background which I want behind the duck in the photo, and then just go ahead and take a photograph like that. So a very cool system. I really like how this works, and it really allows you to take full advantage of the wonderful, I guess, resolution and such which you can get with medium format film. We have a few other controls on the camera. Of course, we have the shutter release button here, and as this is a medium format camera, of course you're going to need a cable release. Because these cameras are really popular for things like landscapes or long exposures or things like that. We have a selector switch here, very similar to what you'll find on a more modern DSLR camera. We have single continuous shooting, and we have a self-timer setting here. On the front here, we have a stop down lever, which allows you to stop down the aperture and get a preview of the depth of field. I guess you can also call it a depth of field preview lever. On the other side here, we have a sync socket for mounting a flash. Over here we have a multiple exposure lever, so if you depress this, you can take more than one exposure on the same part of the film. It used to be a really popular thing to do back in the days gone by. We have 2 tripod sockets. We have one here on the side, so you can set the camera up in portrait mode, and we have another one here on the bottom for shooting, I guess, in landscape mode. On the bottom here we have a couple of things. First, we have this kind of funny looking cap here, and if you take this off, this allows you to attach a external power source to the camera, so it doesn't have to rely on the batteries in the grip. And a lot of these cameras are used in photo studios. When my daughter went out for her Shichigo-san photo shoot a couple of weeks ago, I noticed they had some of these cameras in there, and of course these are just plugged into the wall, so they have power all the time. We have a little thing here, this kind of lever, which allows you to stop the film counter and remove the film in mid-roll. In some medium format cameras, you kind of have to rewind the film all the way to the end before you can rewind it. This camera here allows you to kind of stop in mid-roll, remove the film. So say you've gotten a situation where you have to take a photograph, but the film you're using isn't suitable, and you don't want to kind of wind through it and try to find it again. You can simply push the lever here, remove the film back. Of course, you're going to want to do that in a dark place so you don't expose the film, but it allows you to do that. Here we have the switch which you lift up to remove the battery holder. This camera accepts 6 AA 1.5 volt batteries, very easy to find. I like to use the Panasonic I guess lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. These last, in my experience, for years and years. They recharge pretty quickly and they give really good consistent power to these cameras. On the back here we have, this is the film cartridge. And the film cartridge is a little bit tricky on these cameras. It's a little bit counterintuitive compared to, say, cameras like twin lens reflex cameras or cameras with removable film backs like the, say, Pentax 67. Not that doesn't remove back, but Mamiya Press Pentax. It's a little bit backwards on this, and I'll show you what I mean by that. The first thing you need to do is you need to remove this film back to change film. You pop open this lever here and turn it to where these red dots align, like so. And then you just pull it out like so. You can see the shutter curtain in the back of the camera here. I'll go ahead and set this down. And we have a take-up spool here, and you would put your film spool on the other side. And when you are putting in one of these cameras, you have to kind of be careful of how you load the film, because you want the film to come out on the correct side, the naked part of the film. You don't want to put in the film backwards so the paper is being exposed to the light rather than the film itself. If you look here, we kind of have an arrow indicator where my finger is pointing in, and it shows you which way you should be unrolling the film from the film spool. So you would just pop this up like so. These both pop on both sides, very easy. Drop your roll of roll film here. Put this back down so it's lined up in the center, and then following the arrow, pull the film paper over the backing plate here, or pressure plate, feed it into the take-up spool, and simply start winding it here. And eventually, as you wind it, you'll see the paper winding, and you should have the black side of the paper facing this way, and the color side being on the opposite side. And as you're winding, you keep winding until the arrow on the backing paper, you'll see it as it comes up on the back side here. You want it to line up with the S here and this safety orange mark here on the bottom. When the arrow is lined up across, you have to put the film cartridge back in. If you have a eye cup, you'll have to lift it up a little bit so it will go in. Click it into place and lock it like so. Once that is done, you would turn the camera on and depress the shutter button, and that will automatically wind the film to the number 1, and then the camera is ready to shoot. It's very, very simple. Going to the lens here, one thing that about these lenses, you'll notice you have really small apertures here. This one goes all the way down to f32. And the thing about these apertures here is as you get to larger formats, you're able to use smaller apertures than you can use with, say, smaller formats. So if you're shooting, say, half-frame format or 1:10 format, you can't really shoot at really small apertures because you start to get something which is called diffraction. And it makes, instead of making the photos sharper, when you shoot at small apertures, it starts to make them softer. This gets a little better with 35mm film, but you still can't stop down 35mm too much. When you get to medium format cameras, you can stop them down even more, and then when you get up to, say, the larger format cameras, yes, you can stop down to, say, f64, and I've seen cameras which have even smaller apertures than that. But for this camera here, I get the best results, say, in medium format between, usually around f11, sometimes up to f16. I don't really shoot a lot at the larger apertures unless, you're doing portraits where you want someone's face to come out very nice and in focus, and you want to kind of throw the background out of focus, or you have stuff in the background which is kind of noisy. Stuff that you don't want, so say trash or an ugly building or something like that. You can kind of open the aperture and focus on something more close, and that ugly stuff in the background kind of gets soft and fuzzy and you don't notice it so much. This lens here is an autofocus lens. The cool thing about the 645N is it can also use the earlier 645 manual focus lenses. So this camera is really cool because it allows you to use the earlier and later technology. Overall, it's a really good camera. As I said, I sell these cameras, and this one will be listed up for a sale on my stores later on tonight. I've got a couple of other medium format cameras I'm working on. This one, an RZ67, and another Mamiya press. So if you're interested in those, please go and visit my stores and check them out. I plan to be doing a couple of more videos on other medium format cameras this week. So if you're interested in seeing these, please subscribe or check back. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.